I think the biggest surprise to me is the way, and I shouldn't be surprised, but at the time when we went into Afghanistan, right, there were very few voices against it. And it was a total opaque, unified front of the Pentagon, the military, the White House, of Congress for the most part, except for, folks like Barbara Lee, Representative Barbara Lee.
Shout out.
And every single major media outlet. And remember, we had very few alternative media outlets at that time that sort of had broad reach, saying we must go into Afghanistan. We must occupy this country. We must get them because they harbored terrorists. And we did it. People think the Iraq war was poorly done.
Yeah.
Look at Afghanistan. My God, but and there's a lot to say on this. So now I am surprised to see the same people, almost the same media figures, going back into the oh my gosh, what a blunder. Wow. I can't believe we're doing this. I mean, I believe in getting out, but not like this. But do you believe in getting out? No. But were you covering this, a year ago? But have you spoken? I mean, this is the other thing. I'm going to play a clip, but I do want to say, people keep on talking about how there hasn't been an American casualty since last February, right? But there have been Afghan casualties. There have been civilians that have been hit. Trump ramped up drone strikes, by the way. Civilians have been in the crosshairs of this ever since. And this is some good history everyone needs to know. When the Taliban fled Afghanistan, guess who was left? Civilians. So guess who was turning in so-called terrorists? Civilians on civilians. It was just civilians being like, that's a terrorist, that's a terrorist. And it was just like, and everyone was, send them to Guantanamo, etc. So the difference right now is that we've got a president who seems to be saying different things. He seems to be doubling down on his decision. And I want to play you some clips from Biden this week from a press conference, and then the things that he's been saying to, mainstream media.
We went and did the mission. You've known my position for a long, long time. It's time to end this war. The estimates of the cost of this war over the last 20 years range from a minimum of $1 trillion to a think tank at one of the universities saying $2 trillion. That's somewhere between $150 million a day and $300 million a day. If I had said on May the 2nd or 3rd, we are not leaving, we are staying, does anybody truly believe that I would not have had to put in significantly more American forces, send your sons, your daughters, like my son was sent to Iraq, to maybe die? And for what?
Max, your response to how Biden is playing it, and specifically those bits.
That Biden is telling half-truths, and that's better than no truths. So the fact that this war is unwinnable by the United States lost, and is not doing any good in Afghanistan, acknowledging that is a good thing. And I will give him the credit for being willing to take the flak for being the one to pull the plug, because whoever pulls the plug on a U.S. war that isn't a total victory is going to catch political flack.
Yeah.
But what is unsaid, and what he said in other clips, essentially blaming the Afghans for what's happening, is dead wrong.
Yeah.
This war was unwinnable from day one.
Mm-hmm.
And the ignorance about Afghanistan, Afghan society, and the Afghan people, we've just had an example of it. Here, the government didn't know 2 weeks ago that this is the kind of thing that was going to happen. Shows that we in the sense that I'm part of the United States, whether I like it or not, but the government, the national security establishment, the generals, I mean, the level of ignorance and the level of deception and self-deception is just off the hook. And that's not different from Vietnam either, the level of deception and self-deception. we have to face the fact, and I have, you know, the Taliban's politics and my politics are quite different. But we have to face the fact that more people in Afghanistan at this stage preferred Taliban rule to the continued rule of the government, if you want to call it a government, that was a cobbled together corrupt pyramid scheme by the United States and a bunch of opportunists. There were also sincere people who felt that was a better way in the cities, who either because of their critique of the Taliban or what they thought was possible in the government. So it's very painful. Those people are going to suffer and are suffering. And those are the people who are trying to get out right now. And we, the United States and the rest of the world, has an obligation to them. In a civil war, it's never simple. And it's not all good guys on one side and all bad guys on the other side. There are reasons why people take the stances they do. And, you know, the point about putting yourself in other people's shoes, it's really easy from a distance to say, oh, this or oh, that or the other thing. It's not so simple. When you're in the middle of a country that's being wrecked, there's a bunch of people with guns floating around. There's all kinds of different ideological currents, different political forces, governments intervening, mercenaries. You know, it's not a good time for all the holier than thou purism coming from the United States. So there's people suffering who oppose the Taliban. And there's plenty of people who supported the Taliban because we bombed their weddings, we bombed their villages, and the government was stealing from them. I mean, you know, you have to have some sympathy for them too, even if you don't like the politics of the Taliban and so on. I mean, they're a creation of the modern world. All this nonsense about them being, you know, primitive or from the past. Of course, they're certain looking to the past. Everybody looks to the past. Look at the United States. We've got a whole movement that's talking about make America great again. And a third of the country that thinks we should go back, not just to the 1950s, but maybe to the 1850s.
Yeah.
Or at least the rollback of Reconstruction and the new rule. So, you know, and the Taliban, you know, they look to certain things in Afghan history, but they're a product of the modern world. The kind of nationalism, the kind of different colonialism and dealing with colonialism and all of that. So, you know, Biden it's the right decision to get out of Afghanistan. His explanations are unwilling to confront the real truth of what happened, just like the United States was unwilling after Vietnam to confront the real truth of what happened in Vietnam. And, you know, we need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission for the globe, and the United States should be part of that. But it's just, every country that's been at the center of a global empire for a long time, it builds in an imperial mentality. You still see the remnants of it in Britain today, for heaven's sake. And Britannia hasn't ruled the waves for 100 years, and there's all this nonsense.
They're still worried about the skin color of their grandchild.
They still have a queen.
But yeah, I mean, look, I do think that you're right that Biden is never going to admit that the United States just lost the war. And there is some good analysis around the fact that this was, even though it is chaotic, it was the best way, because essentially they knew that the Taliban had been taking control over territory as Trump had been winding down, pulling troops out, had made a deal with the Taliban, even though, of course, they don't own up to that. And that this was going to come sooner or later. It was going to come. And that what would have looked worse, two scenarios. One, we handed control over to the Taliban. That would have looked terrible. Or two, we left 100 troops. Suddenly they're surrounded in Kandahar by a bunch of Taliban with Afghan forces, and there's casualties.
Right.
That would have been very, very bad. So there's it's hard to imagine. Somehow the media is not imagining there are worse scenarios. Ooh, there's been a worse scenario in the last 20 years, i.e. the status quo that was the occupation of Afghanistan.
Not only that, but also you kind of look at the way that kind of the mainstream media is bringing on people who are just talking about, this horrible situation, this terrible pullout that has happened, and how the Afghan people just they didn't fight back. We trained them, we gave them all the weapons, they just did not fight back.
Sure, we embezzled a lot of it. There's billions that we kept for ourselves.
But we can't believe they didn't fight back, which says to me, number one, a lot of them are just mad about their job security ending, because a lot of these people made their names off of covering wars like Afghanistan. But number two, it says to me that these people would prefer a civil war to what's happening right now. They would prefer to make themselves feel better about what is happening, about America leaving. They would prefer that there were a prolonged civil war. And the fact that they didn't get that happening, that's just, that for them, that's the true tragedy of the situation, is the fact that they didn't get their precious civil war.
What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do it.